literally feeling like your entire existence is at stake. You're good. You guys don't understand. You weren't born when I was born, so you can be wrong and you're okay.
Yes.
I was told the truth, and there's a lot at stake here. If I'm wrong, there's no hope for me after this.
Hey, my name is Shelise Ansola, and this is Cults to Consciousness, where we discuss leaving high-demand religions or organizations and finding healing and independence through awareness and true individual sovereignty. If you're listening only and you want to see the first little bit of our new studio, go to my YouTube channel at Cults to Consciousness. We are in the process of moving into a new space. As you can tell, it's a little bit different, and we're super excited. More on that later. So go to the YouTube channel. You can like and subscribe and leave us some comments, which we are going to be featuring some of those today. This is a follow-up episode. Everyone loved the first one. I thought I could get it done in an hour. That was poor judgment on my part. So we are back. We are back with someone who left the Fundamentalist Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, also known as Fundamentalist Mormonism, not to be confused with the Warren Jeffs sect, although it did birth from that. So welcome back to the show, Calvin Wayman.
I'm so excited for round 2. We had so much fun. We got to do it again.
So good. In fact, I'm going to open with some comments here. Jojo, thank you so much for this comment. You are amazing. You left a little super chat cash, and I really appreciate you. So Jojo says, oh no, another cliffhanger. Sorry, but we had to. Calvin, thanks for sharing your story. You have really gained a lot of wisdom. The shadow puppet story was brilliant and of course would have had you thinking. I'm gobsmacked at the blatant racism in their teachings. That is absolutely despicable. We also have a comment from Shanna P. Law Nerd. Just finished this. What an incredibly powerful testimony from this young man. I have seldom seen someone so young who is so self-aware. Very excited for part 2. Thank you both for this. And then we have Abigail Regan, or Reagan, I'm not sure how to pronounce it. What an absolutely strange, only insofar as it's wildly different from most other childhood experiences, way to conceive of motherhood, family structure, power dynamics. Could be a thesis in the works. And then she follows up with another comment. Hope a follow-up comes soon. I want to hear more about sibling family relationships. How did betrayal or solidarity function in this kind of family? Would the kids snitch on each other and stuff? Or were unnecessary divisions between families seen as potential offense to the church? So let's start there. Do you have a response for Abigail?
Oh, man. I touch on a little bit. I try to walk a little bit carefully and talk about my story and not other people's story and not other people's experiences. But yeah, the one way I explained it is with this many people, it kind of, in a way, acted as though, yes, there's some people you're close with, but there still was like cliques among siblings. And we didn't talk about this in the first episode, but the dynamic between children and parents, I also think was different than what most kids grow up with. It started to feel almost like citizenship and law enforcement, or like the people in charge. Like we would look out for each other and make sure that mostly we covered each other's backs. Like, we're in a fenced yard, and so didn't get to go out into the streets and stuff like that. But when I was a teenager, my brothers and I decided to ride our bicycles as fast as we could to Wendy's or McDonald's, and one of the other brothers would keep watch, and so we'd watch each other's back that way, and if try to divert attention if parents were going some other direction and stuff like that. So yeah, I think that paints a little bit of the picture. But yeah, super interesting as far as, because there's so many, it feels almost like a village, even among siblings. And there was a clear class distinction between the kids and the parents.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I failed to clarify here, if this is your first time watching Calvin and I, we are speaking of the Fundamentalist Mormon group that practices polygamy. That's the main difference between the mainstream Mormon church and the one that Calvin grew up in. So Calvin had 4 mothers and 44 siblings, just to put all of this into perspective. In fact, someone had a really great question.
All in one house.
All in one house. That just blows my mind. Someone even said, RMS said, with having so many siblings, are there some you wouldn't recognize if you saw them?
Oh my gosh. I get that question so many times. People say, can you remember all your siblings' names? And I usually say, well, Aaron, Leroy, Pamela, Clayne, Guy, Miriam, Miranda, Michelle, Melanie, David, Calvin, that's me, Anna, Jonathan. I could keep going down, but of course, because, well, for me, I was the 11th. And so you only get one or two new siblings. I compare it to sports. If you really love your sports team, you know all the players. You know who the third string quarterback is. And especially, like in my case, we just got a new player, like one or two new players a year. So it was easy to remember.
Two new players.
But I'd recognize them. Just don't ask me to remember their like details like birthdays. If somebody says, try to name all of your siblings' birthdays, that would be brutally mean to ask that.
Oh my goodness. So here's one more question, and then I want to start asking my own questions, because this is something that's come up a few times when we talk about fundamentalist Mormonism, and it's a username Dorzip. I don't know how to say that either. I'm sorry. I was wondering, children born are roughly 50% male and female. So if a man gets multiple wives in a community and a woman can only have one husband, what happens to all of the other males that are in, quote, surplus? Doing the math, there has to be quite a few men who'd remain single. And in a community where your salvation depends on you having not one but just multiple wives,
you see,
where are we at here with this?
See, that person is using way too much thinking. It doesn't go that deep. And what I'm saying is, like, yes, obviously. Well, and it depends on where you're at. Like certainly in Warren Jeff's group, it became a real issue. So they literally would just start excommunicating boys.
Oh, wow.
So like kicking them out. They became, some of them known as the Lost Boys.
Right.
You know? So because there wasn't enough. And again, that's something that there's a lot of these things you just start poking and then the whole thing starts cracking, and that's a big one. And in mine, it hasn't, the religion that I grew up in, which again is a break off of Warren Jeff's church. It was all that one church at one point, for those that didn't see the first episode. And so the generation before me, everybody in the work was in that church. But the one, excuse me, but the one that I was in, some would like leave, just like there's attrition, like some teenagers would just leave, but I there hasn't been like an obvious needing to kick men out yet that I am aware.
Okay. Yeah, that's interesting. And I want to get into your arranged marriage because I'm dying to know how you felt about it. If you were pumped about it, you have the priesthood, you're going to be the man of the house. Pumped. Like, so were you excited to have your own bunch of like football teams worth of children or what's going through your mind?
Yeah, I totally was. Yeah, I just thought that was the way. I just thought that was the way. In fact, I figured that, I was going to have a bunch of kids too. And so I decided before I had kids, I like patterns. And so I'm going to start naming my children off of the alphabet. So I have two kids. My first son's name is Archie, to begin with A.
Yeah.
My next child is a daughter, call her Belle. And then I was going to just keep going down the list until I had 26 or something.
Oh my gosh. So you were in it. You were like, from the beginning, you're like, let's plan this out. Wow.
Yeah, totally. I was so in it. So I don't know what you had asked about the arranged marriage thing, but yeah, I was totally all for it.
Okay. How old were you when you were told? Because I'm assuming they just come to you. If it's like anything that Jude mentioned, where they just knock on your door and you're like, okay, you're getting married in a couple hours. Was that the same thing?
Close. With the caveat that this is something I've been like, you're looking forward for that knock on the door like forever, because you're preparing, like I talk about in the first episode, like throughout my teenage years and everything, I'm being such a good boy, preparing myself for marriage. So the way marriage is viewed in fundamentalism is we take what Disney portrays and we just believe it quite literally with one or two caveats. So Disney believes and makes us believe that there's the one true person for us.
Mm-hmm.
Fundamentalism believes that so hardcore that you're already married essentially, or promised to that person before you were born. So in the pre-existence, you got together and you're like, okay, we're going to get together. Do you want to be husband and wife? Sure. And then we even got with the kids and say,
do you want to come to
do you want to be our kids? And you're like, will you be our parents? Yeah. And it was all arranged before that. So you have a couple options. You could go your own way, which is probably selfish based on your own feelings, and the devil can like confuse you. You might fall in love with somebody, but how do you know that's actually love? What if it's feelings and all that sort of stuff? And get the wrong person because you let your flawed existence pick your partner. Or you could let the church leaders arrange it for you.
Yeah.
That way, they're going to help you find your soulmate,
of course.
The one you already promised.
That makes sense because you're thinking that it's from God, because you think that they speak from God.
Totally.
And so when they say this is your soulmate,
yes,
that makes sense. You'd be like, great, thanks for doing the hard work for me.
Exactly. So that's exactly how it's pitched. And so that sounds great for guys and girls. So a lot of women are like, I don't want to go through I look out in the world, dating looks horrible, like all the rejection. As a guy, it's like, yeah, I don't have to go get rejected. And then how it's pitched also is, do you want to be a selfish person that just, you're going to go fall in love and it's like downplayed as like this worldly thing? Or do you want what God wants?
Whoa.
Do you want to do your own selfish thing, or do you want what God wants? So I was very conditioned super early on that I wanted to do the right thing.
Yeah.
I wanted to, of course I want what God wants. I just have to give up like that process. I just have to not have, I mean, it was still difficult. Like I went through teenage years and college, never dating, because I made the decision when I was 15 that I wasn't going to kiss anyone until I was married to them. I've not kept that since the religion, I will say.
Well,
but yeah, that's how it was prepped. And so then how I actually got the word, if you want to go into that, is,
I do.
During the time I got told, I had just graduated. So again, I was in college and I was really questioning things, but at the same time, I'm questioning from the place of, please point back to, like, I was hoping I would find that this was true. I wasn't looking for it to
not be
crumble.
True.
I was like, I wasn't really looking for it to not be true. I was looking for truth, and I was hoping secretly that if it was true, then I would find it. Mm-hmm. But I was still going to church and all that sort of stuff. And then one day, in after church in Fundamentalist Mormonism, it's very common for the congregation to go like shake hands with like the prophet and different church leaders. And the church leader at the time, it still is, was like, come see me after. And I went in the back room and he was like, are you ready to get married? I said, yeah. And so he says, okay, this is who you're going to marry. And when he said it, I was just like, wait, really? Like, I didn't say that out loud, but he said the name.
And you were like, her?
Yeah. I said that. And now I'm getting really, I'm getting like doubting myself, because I'm like, wait, am I being a bad person that I'm saying, wait, her?
Oh, no.
Are we actually compatible? And I'm just thinking about it because I knew who it was, or who he said.
Yeah.
Like, we're in the same religion and everything. We didn't really hang out. But I knew we were like very different from place of personality, the way we viewed life.
Sure.
But again, we're taught that if a guy gets a name and he turns it down, no bueno. Like, it's, again, God saying, here, I'm giving you a blessing, you rejecting it, therefore flipping off God.
Whoa.
So there's this pressure to accept. And then we're also taught that God will never give you something that you cannot handle. And so then you have these mind games of like, oh, if I got this, it must be for me. Maybe it's some challenge. It's to help me grow. We're just in this blip of life. Maybe it's better for the eternities. And here's my other guy side of my brain. Plus, I get to be a polygamist, so maybe it's just my first wife that's going to be hard. Maybe I'll get the second one or the third one that will be a little bit more compatible.
Oh my gosh.
And so, okay, maybe I just need to accept this. So all this conversation happened within 15 seconds of me getting the name. I had all those thoughts. And then I was like, okay, yeah, okay. And then here's the funny part of the story. I'm driving home. My phone rings. It's the prophet.
The prophet is calling you.
Yeah, the same one that I was just in meeting with.
Okay, so I'm sorry. This is this is a piece of information that I'm a little blown away by, just because as growing up in the mainstream Mormon church, you would never to meet the prophet. No one gets to meet the prophet. And so I guess it makes sense though if you're in a smaller community.
When you have a small, it's totally small.
So was it normal for the prophet to call up members?
No.
Okay, so this is a big deal.
It was not normal. It was a big deal. It was for sure a big deal. He got my number from somebody else and said, call Calvin. And I was like, hello. I was like, hey, Brother John, that's what we called him. President John Timpson wants to talk to you. And he gives the phone to him. And I get on the phone. I was like, yes. And he's like, I told you the wrong name.
No.
Don't
Psych.
ask for this one.
Oh my.
Ask for this one.
How did he get that wrong?
Well, this is how. There was two brothers, me and my brother, that were getting arranged, and two sisters that were getting arranged, and he crossed us over.
Oh my gosh.
And so it made way more sense.
So then how did you feel?
So relieved. I felt so good. I can't.
So you were happy about the right one.
Yes. Way more. Yes. Yes.
Okay. So I have to ask some clarifying questions here. A couple things. Number one, how big approximately would you say your sect of fundamentalism was? Like 50 to 100, 100 to 200? Because I am assuming that it's fairly small and you probably know these women pretty well. Like you said, you knew the first one. You're like, no, this can't be right. And then the second question is, how old were both of you at the time?
So the overall church, I think just for scale, Warren Jeff's church, I think, is estimated between 7,000 to 10,000. Ours is estimated to be about 2,000.
Okay. That's still fairly big.
Yeah, fairly big, but kind of small. And the families are so big that there's basically like 7 to 10 families, that 7 to 10 last names, I'll say. Like it's a very... and you, if you don't know who someone is, you at least know what family they are. Because when you're around that, you start to notice similarities. Oh, you're a Zitting, you're a Timpson, you're a Knutson, you're a Wayman, you're a Barlow, you're a Jessup. You start to actually note. It's actually fascinating if you're into like anthropology or anything else like humans, that you literally can see, oh, look what a Zitting mixed baby with a Barlow does.
Oh my gosh.
And you just know, like, you're like, hey, I can tell you're a Knutson. Who's your mother? Like, oh yeah. Like people, that's how people talk about the weather. I did not hang out with either of those girls, but I did their like brothers periodically, because the other dynamic with this whole thing is I grew up in Salt Lake, or a suburb of Salt Lake City, not where the headquarters of the church is, down in the Colorado City, Arizona area, Centennial Park specifically, but 5 minutes from Colorado City. So I didn't associate with them that much, but we knew of each other because we're in the same, church.
Second question, how old were you both?
Oh, yes. She was 18. And I was 24, about to turn 25.
Okay, that's super reasonable.
Yeah, and here's another thing that people may not know that might be a fun, interesting fact as far as how arranged marriages go. it's not always directly arranged in that, like, certainly the veto power is in the prophets.
Mm-hmm.
However, the women have a little bit of pull. So the women, they are kind of the ones that initiate the whole thing, and they go to the church leaders and say they're essentially ready to get married. What's interesting, the term that we said growing up, that this was not funny to me, I did not even get it until after leaving. They call this process turning yourself in.
Right.
So women go and turn themselves in. And I'm like, that's like when you're like getting arrested or something. That's such an appropriate phrase. Like, so women turn themselves in to get married. And then there's a conversation that goes something like this. Do you know, or do you have impressions? Do you have any impressions of who you belong to? Who you should marry?
Really?
And yeah. And the woman will say yes or no. If it's no, then they'll arrange for her. Or she might say, actually, yeah, this guy. And I actually had feelings about this guy. And then they'll pray about it. They may say, no, it's definitely not that guy. Or they'll be like, we think it's that guy, but we're going to go pray about it and we'll let you know. And they'll go pray about it. Sometimes they'll be like, it's definitely not him. We still need to find the person for you. And so sometimes women can be in kind of matchmake mode for like weeks, months, or sometimes even years, where they've turned themselves in, ready to get married, and the match just hasn't come together yet. And it's almost like this depressing moment for her. She's like, does anybody want me? And so, like, it's been interesting.
Whoa.
And it's grounds for like small town gossip. Like, didn't she turn herself in a long time ago? Why isn't she married? Or,
oh my gosh.
And then, like, if things start to get married and then they fall apart. But then there's this other way where, yeah, a woman will just go in and they'll say, do you have somebody in mind? Yes. This guy, like, that sounds good. We're going to pray about it. And then they'll come back and say, we feel good about it. That's your guy. That's how mine happened.
Oh, that's good.
So she went in and asked for me, and they prayed about it, and then came out and said, yes, that's the guy.
I'm so happy to hear that that was the case for you, because listening to Jude's story, she was just blindsided with an arrangement and she wanted nothing to do with it. So I'm so glad that it's not like that in all cases, which we always put out disclaimers. Like, of course, someone's story is not going to be the same for everyone's story. Wow, that's so great.
As I mentioned in episode 1, all this is on a spectrum.
Yeah.
So it's like a spectrum of strangeness and cultiness. And certainly a lot of people get placed that it like that should have never happened, and it's broken up in like a month or 2 months. Yeah, it's fascinating.
Yeah, I was wondering what the actual temple marriages looked like, or did you have temple marriages? Because that's a huge part of mainstream Mormonism. Is they expect you to get married in the temple.
This was a comment on part 1.
Yep, I was gonna read it. Sedona Rose question: how can FLDS go to celestial heaven without access to the temples? And in your case, we wanted to make the distinction that it's not technically FLDS labeled, because that was Warren Jeff's sect, but Fundamentalist Mormonism.
I was a little bit cheeky because I responded back to it, and I said something along the lines of, okay, in Fundamentalist Mormonism, we believe this, Warren Jeffs believe it, people believed it as well, that all the temples that were made before polygamy was done away with in the LDS church is really ours.
Oh.
The temple in Salt Lake City, that's not yours. Like, you LDS people, like, you we're letting you use it right now. You're welcome. But there's actually secret rooms that we know about that place that you don't even know, because we have visions and whatever, and we know these secret places and rooms.
Wait, is that
Brigham
true?
Young and other church leaders did. I don't fucking know. But that's what we got told. Like, the folklore was, temples are awesome. These temples are really ours. One day, Joseph Smith or Jesus or both are going to come back and set things in order. There's this whole thing that almost feels like second coming of Jesus, but it's known as the one mighty and strong. Mm-hmm. It's pulled out of the Doctrine and Covenants of this, like the one mighty and strong is going to come and set the church in order.
Right.
And when the church comes set in order, what's going to happen is all these apostles, in air quotes, we would air quote them, in the LDS church don't really hold the priesthood because they did away with polygamy. They're just holding these places. They're going to get kicked out. We're going to get put back, and we might be able to use some of the temples that have been built since, but they're going to have to be like reconfigured and have certainly rededicated. We're already going to have to rededicate the ones previous, but those are really rightfully the priesthoods, and we're the ones that have the priesthood, not the LDS church. So they're really ours, and they're just under apostate control.
That's
how we were raised.
Okay.
Yeah, because we're the real church. We're the real church.
The real one.
That's how we were raised.
Isn't that D&C verse the same one that was used by other fundamentalist prophets to be like, see, it even says it right here that one mighty and strong will have to put the church back to the way it should be, and I'm that person?
Mm-hmm.
Did your prophet use that same verse?
No, but there's been decent. I mean, this is a whole other drama thing that happened in my church. Like within the year or two before I left, some high-ranking person did that. So some high-ranking person said, which actually was like, so the top dude's name's John Timpson. There's a priesthood council, but he's the top dude. His brother came out and said, I had this revelation, angels or whatever came to me. I'm the one mighty and strong. Mm-hmm. And so I'm here to set things in order. And so he would like sometimes stand up in church or priesthood meeting and like try to like do some sort of correction. It created a little bit of commotion. It was like a big deal.
Wow.
in my church. And so, but this happens all the time in fundamentalism where, and it can be attributed all the way back to Joseph Smith. Joseph Smith was really big on whose right it is to rule, who has the true authority.
Yeah.
And so you see from his tradition that he started, there's so many different Mormon factions of all kinds. It's crazy. Like there's like dozens and dozens. Fundamentalism and not fundamental. They're like everywhere.
That came to mind because of Under the Banner of Heaven, the book and the TV show, which chef's kiss. We've talked about it before, but I got us off track here. I want to go back to, did you have to do any sort of temple ritual for your wedding?
Yes, temple. Okay, that's where we were. So what do we do in the meantime while we don't have temples? That's the question. What do we do while you guys...
The fake Mormons.
You know, I'm being tongue-in-cheek.
Taking them over.
Why the fake Mormons taking control and not the true church. In the meantime, we had a few different rituals we would do. Just a quick caveat. Like when we would pray, we would still face either the closest temple. When I grew up, we would face the Salt Lake Temple when we prayed. So like still give deference to the temple.
Wow.
But what ended up happening is they would create temple rooms in homes.
Interesting.
When I got married in John Timpson's house in Centennial Park in a temple room that was dedicated specifically for marriages. It didn't have all the other rooms and all the processes of temples, and that was a big conversation on my wedding day of like, normally there's this, and this that you do. We're just doing the final piece, which is the marriage ceremony, you know? So someday when things come back in order, we're going to have temples again, and this is the things that we're going to do in the meantime, but this is what we have today. And so that's to answer the commenter's question. That's how it's done, is rooms dedicated in usually the priesthood council's home, as this is where you're going to get your temple blessing while we don't have a temple.
Now, the next burning question, for those who don't know or who aren't Mormon or haven't studied it, the Mormon temple ceremonies are super weird. They're very culty. There's lots of super weird garb that you have to put on. Guys have weird baker hats, and you have it's like all white. And then you have this
Don't forget
apron.
the secret handshakes.
There are secret handshakes and hand motions and like putting your hand through a veil and being pulled through. There's like a lot of weird stuff. My question to you, Calvin, did you have any of that?
Almost none of it. So I got to wear my suit and everything. I just had to, I did a kneeling thing and some blessing thing. And then I did definitely this handshake where you like, when I was getting married, like put my hand on her wrist and hers on mine or whatever, and did some sort of like special thing. I don't know.
In that case, I would have to say this may be, there's probably more, but this is definitely one way the fundamentalists have it better. Because the mainstream Mormon temple ceremonies are super weird and chanty.
Is it long?
Yes. So I haven't been personally. I've seen secret footage. Thanks, new name Noah. I actually went into a temple when I was 10 or 11, maybe 12, because my half-sister got sealed to our family. So I got to see all the garb, but I didn't get to see all of the endowment ceremonies, which is where they do like they get in circles and put hands on each other and one arm up into a square and they say things. And so I've heard so many stories of women who are so excited to get married in the temple because our entire lives, literally as children, it's I want to go to the temple. I will go there someday to see the Holy Spirit, to listen and to pray. Like something like that. So women are super excited to go to the temple and get married and get sealed. And we are told that the only way to get to the highest level of heaven, because there are many levels, is getting married in the temple. So they go and then they realize, I'm not even allowed to wear my wedding dress that I purchased. They usually put them in really ill-fitted, bad fabric, length. The sleeve lengths are usually to your wrist, but there may be some that are maybe elbow length or mid arm, like mid bicep, and then to the floor, just like really ugly. And the ceremony is not lovely or pretty. There's no love involved. It's swear fealty to your husband. He swears fealty to God. Exactly. And so a lot of women come out feeling really sad and cry. And
that's appropriate.
So I think you had it better.
I do too. We still have the fealty thing. I have two quick rants. I know you're going to ask more questions, but two quick rants that's just the Mormon thing in general that I just notice being on the outside looking in.
Okay.
First of all, what blows me up is that they have this thing, and this is the whole Mormon movement, fundamentalism, regular Mormonism, and all that's like, we have this thing and you're going to be saved. And like, we have the one true church and you come here, but there's so many goddamn hoops, like all those different things that you have to do. Like, this is how you get your blessing. Oh, this is how you get your blessing. This is how you get your blessing. Jump through this hoop to get this blessing, to do this, to do this. And then that's the one thing. It's like, there's so many things that you got to do to get the blessing. And then it's usually pretty vague to get like what level of blessing. And then there's like, you can have celestial kingdom blessings, terrestrial kingdom blessings, celestial level blessings. And so that part drives me crazy when I look at, like, we have the best thing and then they give so many hoops from Joseph Smith to now that you have to jump through to get the thing. And I heard a quote of addiction recently that kind of reminds me of this, or the way addiction is defined. And it's like, you can never get enough of something that almost works or that doesn't quite work. And so what I mean is, like, it's almost like these breadcrumbs of like, it's almost there. You're going to get this, you're going to have this blessing. And so it almost creates this strange like addiction to keep people in so they can keep their blessings. When you can have it, but not quite, like soaking. Yeah. Exactly. You can almost have it, but not quite. Oh my goodness. We could go on rants forever. I have to give what was your second thing? Sorry, I interrupted. My second rant is just the other thing that drives me nuts is they tend to hijack regular common human things and make it feel like that they are their originators. Yep. Of course you want to get married. Of course you want to like find the one for you. Soulmates. There's so many things like this. Mm-hmm. You want to advance, you want to have soulmates, you want to have a family, and they make it feel from an early age that this is how you get these things. They say things like being sealed to your family. It's like, wait, wasn't I going to be already? Like, anyway. No, I love that. I think that's such a good point. And okay, so your wedding wasn't
traumatic. It sounds pretty enjoyable. You seem happy. She's happy because she picked you. So that's good.
Yeah.
Now, at what point, because you told us the story about being in college and having this aha moment, was this before or after you were married?
It was before.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yes. So the aha, that's why I call it the crack, because it didn't completely open it. What completely opened it was a short time after I got married, which, again, you learn a lot of different things. Like, yes, I was happy that it wasn't who I first heard. That was good.
Yeah.
And we communicated well, but we still weren't, like, super compatible.
And you were basically strangers.
Yeah. I mean, except that we're in the same church.
Right.
Yeah. And we were married 2 weeks later.
Wow.
You know? So not 2 hours, but still 2 weeks is not that long. So, you're getting married. Okay, you're getting married in 2 weeks.
Were you able to kind of date her in those 2 weeks? Or was it, I meet you at the altar?
Kind of, yeah. We were a little bit more, not rebellious, but just more liberal than either of our families. I never kissed her. In fact, I was at the Pie Pizzeria in Salt Lake City with some of her friends, and they were like, kiss.
Oh my gosh.
And I was like, no, I've waited since I was 15. I'm like, I made the promise I'm not kissing until our wedding day.
Oh my gosh.
To answer your question of where it really blew open, a short time after getting married, I quit my job and went and lived in California. And that's where it blew open, is I decided to be an entrepreneur living outside the bubble for the very first time.
Yep, that'll do it.
That'll do it. That's where things really started to like explode.
Did you move with her?
Yeah, it was a risky entrepreneurial time. Just her, myself, and we actually just had a new baby. And yeah, just loaded up in the U-Haul and headed to Southern California to, try the dream of entrepreneurship. And I went to do door-to-door sales in Southern California.
Wow. So I have a question here from Evermore. How do you pace yourself while questioning and deconstructing? Did it happen all at once? If so, how did you retain your sense of self throughout that process?
It was not overnight. It was a complete piece-by-piece deconstruction before you can piece yourself back. And throughout the whole thing, it was me asking, why do I believe this? Sometimes you're believing something, you don't even know you're believing it. And because you've never been confronted with, there's so many things that we just assume as true because everything around it assumes it. So, for example, I didn't see the way certain people lived and believed until I lived completely somewhere else. And so when I lived in Southern California,
of all places,
yeah.
So good.
I started to go to these business conferences to learn more about business and entrepreneurship. I ended up joining this mastermind where the founder of the mastermind was very faith-based. And so he would host these business and Bible things at his house for entrepreneurs. And I would go to his house. I just thought that's kind of cool, faith-based people. But the one thing that blew my mind is he would talk about good things that happened. He called them God stories of how his life was blessed and people would share about things that happened in their life. That wrecked me.
Right.
Because in Mormonism, we're taught that good things come through God's blessings, but they have to come through the proper channels,
yes,
through the channels of the priesthood. And so when I'm seeing these people with good blessings come to them, it really shook me. I'm like,
that's not possible.
That actually looked awesome. Yeah, that's impossible. Is this the devil? Is this the devil
just being
tricking
tricked
them, thinking that they're having blessings? Because the whole reason I'm in my faith is because I get to have my blessings from this one true connection to God. In fact, that's the only reason the earth is still here, is because there's this small group of people that is still willing to listen to God and listen to his priesthood. And so what really wrecked me, yes, it was the deconstruction. Yes, it was digging into rough stone rolling and all the history of the church and seeing what felt good. But what really started to wreck me was other amazing humans. Because I was not expecting that.
Yeah.
At the level that I did. I was not expecting to see people with blessings. And then, of course, I started to hang out with a bunch of different ethnicities. And And it just made no sense to think that I was somehow better. And then I really I couldn't escape this one thing I noticed. I noticed that people had a pattern of belief based on the culture they were a part of.
Yeah.
No shock there. So the reason that's significant is we were taught that we believed the way we believed because we knew the truth. So did Warren Jeff's people. Like, they thought they believed it because they thought it was the truth, but I knew that they believed it because they were born into it. I knew that people that were Mormon believed it because they were born into it. I knew that Islam, Jewish, like you name it, they believed what they believed because they were born into it. So now I'm really questioning, would I really believe this? If I was on neutral footing, would I really come to this? Or am I being conditioned and influenced based on the environment I'm in? And I didn't really get to question that while I was in the bubble. It wasn't until I'm out of it where I'm like, okay, like, this is so different. And it was such a gift to get to hang out with other cool people of all walks of life.
Yeah.
To compare it and then go back home and go to church and feel terrified because of the hellfire and brimstone that's coming over the pulpit. And then me question, like, does that resonate? Do I want to live in a contractive mode of like, don't mess up? No, I want to risk. I want to try things. It just went against my values. I decided to be an entrepreneur because I wanted something more and bigger. And then I go to church and it's just like, be super careful. Don't mess up. You know, you're afraid of just any step you take could be the one that makes you lose your entire eternity with this one little life that we have.
So your awareness is sinking in.
Yeah.
Your consciousness is sinking in. You're starting to wake up. And I have to bring this up because we talked so heavily about it in the first episode about the blatant racism, like off the charts racism. That was one of the main things people were commenting on. So when you said I'm hanging out with other ethnicities, I had to clarify for viewers who haven't seen the previous video. It's not that Calvin is racist. He was brought up in an extremely racist church. So I have to know, what were your experiences with people who weren't white? What were you expecting? Were you surprised? Like, what were your honest reactions when you started interacting with other ethnicities?
I got to a point where I told them what I told you, where I'm like, you want to know what I believed? I want to hear your reaction to this. And I got close and I told them.
Whoa, that's vulnerable of you.
And it was so good. Like, it was, shout out to my boy Kevin, his girl Devonna, and like, it was just like, they were just people, and it was just cool to really cement what I just said a second ago, that the only reason anybody believes us, like that my family believed the way they believed or the church believed it, is because of the locked down bubble. There's no chance that if there was a family of African Americans that were, you know, going to the same church and school, that those ideas would ever last. It's when there's never any new, like, ideas and stuff like that.
No exposure.
Yeah, there's no exposure of any kind. Yeah, so as I just started hanging out with them, I was just like, you want to hear something? I think this is nonsense. This is what I was taught. And just hearing them like how obviously nonsense. Of course. I don't know if there was anything I was expecting, but there was never, like, the thing that was super interesting for me is I'm taught this story that is talked like it's just fact.
Right.
One would think that the people that the story is for, if they're them, they would have some inkling of the story, you would think. But they obviously had none of it because it wasn't made by them. It was made by a bunch of racist old white dudes.
Yeah.
For a few generations. And so that was just interesting to me to be like, okay, yeah, you haven't even heard anything like this before. Like, and you're the one that would know because you're supposed to be the soul in the previous existence that came down and your parents didn't teach you. Okay, no, okay, that's just because it's a nonsensical story.
Right, because you were taught it like history. Like, this is history, and this is not only history of the Americas because of the blatant racist teachings in the Book of Mormon. But this is also history of the pre-existence, which means the place that we were floating around as spirits before we came down. So to you, as I just wanted to clarify, this was absolutely fact. It was never an opinion of we should feel a certain way toward a certain group of people. Like you said in the previous video, it's be compassionate toward them because they are going through something really difficult because they weren't very valiant in the pre-existence. So I just wanted to clarify that. And I'm so glad that you were able to put aside, like not even put aside, you were able to shove aside out of the way those preconceived notions and see people for who they really were.
Yeah. And that's something that I ended up saying in my audio note.
Yes, let's get to the audio note.
So during this time in California, a lot of it's a roller coaster internally because I'm learning these things and meeting cool people. There's a little bit of hope, but then there's like pure terror because what if I'm wrong? And you're also taught in Mormonism, don't cast pearls before swine. You know, these people don't really know. There's like this real focus on sticking to the membership, and it's in regular Mormonism and fundamentalism. And so there was a piece of me that was like, am I doing the wrong thing by talking to my friends that I'm meeting in California, telling them these things? I had to grapple with, what if I'm wrong?
Yeah.
There was this one event in particular, like I was telling a few people and they're like, I was in not a good place. And they had me describe what I was feeling. And I was like, I'm getting goosebumps going back there. But I was like, if I'm wrong, like, you're good. You guys don't understand. You weren't born where I was born, so you can be wrong and you're okay.
Yes.
I was told the truth, and there's a lot at stake here. If I'm wrong, there's no hope for me after this. And they tried to talk me down, and they're like, well, what would happen to you? And I was like, I would go to hell. And they, well, what would that feel like? And I was like, I'd be so confused and sad. And they would describe everything. And he had me describe my feelings. And he says, Calvin, how do you feel right now?
So this is the bad place. Sorry, I had to.
Something like that. He said, he basically, in so many words, made me realize I was experiencing the very thing I was fearing.
Yeah.
Like, it was the idea of it that was making me feel that way. Like, I was already there. And that was very impactful. And then I went home to, again, the stint in California wasn't so long. It was a year. And it was an incredibly impactful year. And then I'm now in the heart of the religion, and that's where I decide to leave it. And so in the audio note, I'm just going through all of the different things. I'm like, this doesn't add up.
Yeah.
Yes, what if I'm wrong? What if I have to believe that if there is a God, he knows I've been searching for truth this entire time. And if I choose something that feels true on my heart, but I'm wrong, how can that be worse than somebody that just sits on the sofa and does nothing? That doesn't make any sense. How can I be any different just because of how I was born? Isn't it based on your actions, that your character? How does my skin have anything to do with me being better than anybody else? There's no way. That doesn't make sense to me. And I just start going off on the things. I'm like, that doesn't make sense. That doesn't add up. And what makes me ultimately decide, it's hard to describe, but literally feeling like your entire existence is at stake. And we ended the last episode on this. Am I going to live my life based on the external world, my church, my dad, anything else, even something that I read in a book, another guru? Mm-hmm. I can get good things from other places, but when I'm weighing two options, am I going to choose the external, or am I going to lean inward and trust my own gut, my own internal guiding system? And here's the thing, even though those feel like equal options, at the time, the external one felt incredibly heavy like a boulder. The internal peace was like a light little pebble. And I decided I'm going to rather choose that. I would rather choose that and be wrong and live my whole life being wrong, getting to the end and being like, oh, I should have never left. Go to the end and say, I'm willing to face going to hell, if that's what it meant. Because just fundamentally, that's not, I don't want to live the other way.
Yeah.
I don't want to live the other way where I am just trusting, even like it's so godified and glorified to trust, be obedient, have faith, all that stuff. But then it can be taken in a way where it controls and manipulates. And I decided I would rather choose for myself. If something makes sense, I will try to incorporate it. If it doesn't, I'm not putting it on the fucking shelf anymore.
Yes.
And I'm just tearing my shelf down. And so that's what made me decide.
I have to clarify also for people watching, listening, that what he's speaking of, this dilemma, it is so difficult. And I have to put into perspective the choice here, because we were taught, at least I was in mainstream Mormonism, that it is better to have never even known or heard of God, because you will have a chance when you die to go to a higher level of heaven, than to know the truth and turn away. If you know the truth and turn away, you will be cast out into outer darkness, is what they said, into like this abyss with, you can't see even your hand in front of your face. We even did a whole lesson about this in Young Women's. I think I've talked about it before, where they led us into a room that was blacked out and then whispered, "This is outer darkness. How do you feel?" And we're like, "Oh, I'm scared." And they're like, "This is how it'll feel forever." Like, we're talking about traumatic stuff where they're saying, if you leave the church, you will be cast out into outer darkness for time and all eternity. So many of us, for the longest time, I would say probably 5 years, maybe a little longer, every now and then I would be like, oh my gosh, what if I'm wrong and I'm going to outer darkness now because I turned away from the Lord and the true church? Like, this is a real thing.
And it just makes you be so like conservative all the time and passive and like just like sitting down. You like, you don't want to take a step. You're afraid of messing up because eternity is a long time.
Long time.
Like, and if you're going to be in that feeling forever and you're like, oh, it's so fascinating. The stories and the way we're able to believe in those stories so much, and how it can like keep you from being your true self.
Yeah.
It's so fascinating because it literally feels like this one little blip of our life could mess up the entire eternity. And yeah, to your point, like it's so scary. It was a big deal to face that choice.
And you made this decision while you were recording this voice note, right?
Yeah.
And we're going to play that voice note. And so everyone can hear what you were going through, at least a portion of it, because I know you said it's pretty long. But we're going to play a clip of it so everyone can hear exactly what's going through your mind in that moment. You can probably get a sense of how he was feeling, what he was going through, and how he ultimately decided to leave.
So one of the big things I'm feeling right now is, first of all, I don't feel like doing much of anything. As I record this, I'm here in my apartment in Centennial Park, Arizona, by myself, just sitting here on the sofa. I have stuff I need to get ready for it. There's clients I'm working on that I need to be calling. There's a lot of work I could be doing. There's videos I could be editing. And I just don't feel like doing much. And what it's doing is causing me to, what I'm doing is reflecting on what I really want and what I really should be doing. What I'm about to say, I think, is the first time I've ever really recorded myself saying this out loud. But I have to introspect and see, who am I listening to? What voices am I listening to? And over the last day, yesterday and today, it's actually almost felt like a dream. It's felt like a dream I've had, like, in a very groggy sense, not in a coincidental sense. What's the other word? Deja vu sense. It's like I've literally had a dream about about this type of a thing where I have voices from all around saying this is what you should do and what you shouldn't do. And I guess, again, all of this is just context for one of the biggest questions that has been on my mind, is whether or not I am going to stay with the community, with the family, with the religion that I've been a part of for the last 29 plus years, my entire life. And if I actually believe that it is right to stay. And the thing that I think I'm concluding to, the thing that I haven't ever recorded on any way, that I think I'm going to say it here to myself, is I don't think I am going to stay. I don't think I'm going to stay in the work. The work is what the religion is called. And because do I think it's bad? No, that's not why. There's a lot of good. It's given me a lot of good. But when I sit with myself and I imagine myself 5 years down the road, 10 years down the road, 20 years down the road, and staying, it just doesn't feel right. Now, that has created a lot of conflict within me, because in the work, in my religion that I've been a part of, it's talked about like that, how this is it, like this is the main place to be in God's earth. It's where the priesthood is, after all, God's mouthpiece on earth. But as I've traveled, as I've been in planes and looking down and just imagining like square miles, and like where I live right now, Centennial's a square mile, and it's where most of the work is, and just the image and seeing all these people that live in the world and thinking that God has one special people, us, that are his light, his sword, his everything, doesn't make sense to me. Doesn't seem right. And at the same time, there are so many questions that just don't line up. Like, I have to believe that if this religion is the one true place, God's place, then if I was removed from it, I would be able to find it. After all, like, people that are seeking light and truth will find light and truth if they're desperately seeking it. I don't see a Heavenly Father withholding them from the truth. And what is hard to ignore is, if that's the case, if I believe I would find the truth, out of all of the other people out in the world that are looking for truth, first of all, do I think that I'm way smarter than them? Not a chance. In the very least, we're all equal. But all these people searching for truth, how many of them have found the work? Really, 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 really small. In fact, when I look at the work and the religion, who's in it? Who's in it are people that have been in it. They've been born into it. It's a bunch of the same family. That's a red flag to me. And if I look at other religious groups around Mormonism especially, who's in those groups? People that were born into it. Interesting. And so it's at least enough to question it. And beyond that, I think of my values that I believe in, a value that has been really hard that just doesn't seem right to me. Does not seem right. That has been talked around my religion for a long time, is that it's this pure thing, this awesome thing to be white. That in the Bible or the Book of Mormon, at one point it said white and delightsome or something like that. And being black has been a curse. And even on the very positive end of the spectrum of this type of talk, it's been like, no, you should treat black people well, but they just can't have the priesthood. So they're still not equal. They're last in line. And when I think of a God who made all of us in his own image, that doesn't make sense to me. It doesn't make sense. Besides, there's not just black and white, for hell's sakes. There are a massive spectrum. There's even science to make us, that is enough to think that perhaps we all had black skin at one point. Or that we all came from Africa, at least. And there's other extremes in this, that if you have one drop of the seed of Cain, which is defined as the African race, in your bloodstream, you're kind of screwed. That makes no sense to me. Makes no sense. And there are so many things around this that don't add up.
So how do you feel when you go back and listen to that voice note now? Because it's been maybe 5 years, you said?
Every single time, I feel proud. It doesn't feel like me, but I know it is me.
Yeah.
But it makes me so proud to hear the little boy of inside that guy, the uncertainty in it, but still making a stand for himself. There's so much uncertainty on the other side of that decision. Like, it's so hard to explain, and in some ways even harder than he could have imagined.
Yeah.
Then, as far as the loneliness, the anxiety, the everyone you grew up with no longer associating with you, like, but hearing him make that choice anyway, in that uncertainty, I'm proud.
Yeah.
That's the ultimate thing.
Let's get into that. What was it like actually leaving? We were going to dedicate the whole episode to this, but here we are. We're going to keep going if you have time.
We got it.
What was it like? Did your family disown you or ostracize you? You mentioned that your friends did. Did you have to move somewhere else? Take us through what you had to deal with when you made the decision. And was your wife on board?
No. That's what ultimately ended the marriage. So when I left, my immediate family is pretty good right now, but when I left, it was very important to me that I was not 1 foot in, 1 foot out. And so when I left, I made it public. I made a video, put it on Facebook.
Wow, you went all in.
Was pretty respectful. I didn't talk about any of the reasons why. I didn't want to, but I wanted people to know where I stood.
Yeah.
And the way I describe it was, it doesn't mean I'm like throwing away all the good stuff, like my siblings, my mothers, my dad, like the lessons I got. I just feel like a kid that's 25 plus that's leaving his parents' house for the first time.
Yeah.
Does that mean you hate your parents? No, it just means it's time to move on. So when I did that just so people knew where I stood, but it created a complete shitstorm in the community. So a lot of negative vibes, and yeah, it put me in an intense like isolation where I just like I didn't know where to turn. I went into super isolation for a while. I ended up, I was living in Centennial Park at the time and went and lived in Phoenix just to like get away from it all.
Yeah.
And I fell in a dark place. In fact, something I don't think I've shared on an interview yet on this type of thing is it got to the place where I just felt so alone. I was like, holy crap. Like, is this what it's supposed to feel like after? Because, like, I did it for the right reasons. I thought I wanted to do what's true. Why does this feel so heavy? And I fell into a deep, dark depression. And I got to this place where I was walking on a park. I was walking to a park late one night. I don't know why I did this, but I walked up to a flag or a light pole, and in frustration, I hit my head on a light post and hurt myself.
Oh, no.
And was not in a good place.
Yeah.
And that night, I reached out to suicide prevention. Thank goodness they're there. And was like, I just hurt myself, and if I'm doing this now, I don't know what it's going to be like in 2 weeks. Can you help me?
Wow.
And all it took was somebody saying, what are you going through? And I told him all this stuff, and she just like, wow, that's a lot. And I didn't think anybody would understand. I didn't know, but just hearing somebody say, that's a lot. Wow, that's a lot. I just burst out crying, and what ended up happening is they ended up connecting me to this organization called Holding Out Help, which is a organization specifically for fundamentalist kids or anybody escaping polygamy. And they're the ones that helped put me in a good place. They got me a therapist. They helped me with things at the time that were just pressure on my mind, even something as simple as like food, you know, and be like, hey, you're going through a tough time. We're going to see if we can help you out. So yeah. And there it's just been a slow build. Like, I mean, it got to that low point of, you know, like, 'cause I lived a whole life, 30 years, a complete different way. I'm 35 now, and in some ways, I mean, thank goodness for therapy to grapple with, like, why did I have to, like, I feel like I'm starting over in my 30s. If I would have just gotten to start when I was like 19 or 20 or 21, like, live all the different things and then come around and work through it and let go of the anger, let go of the frustration, look at the gifts, the perspective that comes from that, getting to notice where else it comes. Like, I feel like there are things that are true, genuine gifts that I feel that I would go through it again, that I got to see. Like, I'm fascinated at humans' ability to storytell and how it makes us believe anything given the right conditions. And I look at the world in that way, whether in any circle, the stories that we're telling each other and how we get ourselves to believe it. But even though I'm 35, I'm still a baby. I'm 5 years old in this new life, you know?
Yeah.
And so in some ways it still is young, and it's just been last couple of years, it's just been going into myself and asking, okay, now what? Like, I have this whole analogy that helped me during this time. That's like, there's a lot of part of our past that we didn't get to write that story. You know, it was written, we were there, but it's like at some point we wake up and realize that we're the author and we're holding the pen. But it's just in the middle of the book. Like, the book's not over, and we can like decide, like, what am I writing next?
Yeah.
And I think that's an important place to take, because a lot of people go through a lot of hard things. And at the end of the day, what I hope for my life is I don't want to spend my whole life just back there. I want it to be part of the journey of the direction of where I'm going, you know, what I'm up to, what I'm creating, the things I'm doing that interest me, what's meaningful to my life. I want to be about that.
Yeah.
And that's what I hope. If there's any message that my story and anything that I create, it's not one of like, it's not even cult awareness. There's plenty of that. I hope it's like human empowerment,
Yeah.
human individuality, that the human spirit is strong, that if you can get honest with yourself, with who you really are and what you really think and what you really believe, you can take a step, even if it is going against every single institution, person. Like, if it's not you, you don't have to be it. You know, if it's not you, like, I get it so much. I have so much respect for anyone that makes a choice for themselves to be true to themselves when it goes against everything that they've been told is the right way to think, act, or behave, but they know it's not them. And so that's what I'm trying to do. I haven't figured it out. I'm figuring it out, and just, taking it a day by day, week by week, month by month, living a life that feels true to who Calvin Wayman is.
Yeah. Well, a couple things. Thank you for sharing that story.
Yeah.
I'm sure it was difficult, and I think by you being so open and honest and vulnerable, a lot of people watching this video will feel seen and related to. So I'm getting a little choked up. So thank you for sharing that. And I'm going to link the website that you mentioned in the description. So if anyone else needs a support line or someone to reach out to, you can use that resource. And I also just wanted to say, what a beautiful perspective that you have. And it's not one of toxic positivity. It's not one of saying, well, I'm just going to start over and pretend it didn't happen.
No.
But you're owning your story and finding a way to work through that, and finding what works, that still works for you, because you're not a complete brand new baby, as you mentioned. You're a complete toddler, 5-year-old.
Yeah.
You do have life skills, and you did go to college, and there are some things that you have gained, and I'm sure skills specific to you and your story. So it's beautiful seeing how you were able to pull that around into your current life, and you just moved to New York. Like, holy crap, that's a big deal. Congratulations.
Yeah.
Yeah. Tell everybody what you're doing now and how you're settling in and what excites you, what lights your fire.
What lights me up is this. I'm still an entrepreneur. I have an online business, but what really fires me up is this. I want to do more of this type of thing. I want to, get my podcast kicked off and have conversations about cults and culture and trying new things. What fires me up is like just how I know that there were things that ultimately what limited me was my own belief. Like, I heard something, but I decided to take it on, and that's what limited me. And I'm fascinated with that being off. Like, what can you do when that's off? Like, and even physical things, like something that I did at the end of last year, just as a mental challenge. I actually did a YouTube video on this. I ran 2 marathons in a row, 52 miles with no training. In a day. And I did that just to see, like, that we can do hard things.
Push the boundaries.
And to, like, that's the stuff that fires me up. I want to keep doing that with myself. Like, where are my edges right now? Where are my edges in business? Like, push up against that. Like, what's a normal, like, what's a normal thing to do? Like, what's in business, or like, what's interesting to me, stand-up comedy. That's something I'm getting more into, just because I like storytelling, but I also like humor, and I like talking about things that you're not supposed to talk about. And honestly, comedy's also been like my form of like a next level therapy, because I get to make fun of things in my upbringing that I couldn't ever make fun of growing up, because it's just like, You can't talk about that. You can't talk about the temple when you're in your upbringing. You can't talk about the priesthood and stuff like that. And in stand-up comedy, I can, because it's my set. I'm going to talk about whatever I want. And, but yeah, I mean, ultimately, I'm still piecing it together, but best case scenario is a year from now, 2 years from now, I'm doing something similar to what you guys got going here, where, with the stories I'm telling and the speaking I'm doing and the books I'm writing, it's about empowering people to step into the power that they already have.
I love that so much. And this imagery came to mind as you were speaking about finding your edges, because when you grow up in a box, you don't know what your real edges are until you explode the box and then explore the boundaries and see what you like and see what you don't like. And that's what I love about the consciousness part of all of this, from cult to consciousness, is finding your edge, finding your boundaries, finding that consciousness and pushing the limit on your own accord, not because someone tells you to or tells you not to, but finding that for yourself. And then you can pull back if you need to pull back. And that's so exciting. I have one more comment or question before we wrap this up, because I think it'll tie it up nicely, from Sarah Gray. What was the most difficult part in transitioning to life outside of fundamentalist Mormonism? And also, after realizing that everything that you were taught growing up wasn't true, how did you find a way to form your own ideas and be able to trust other people again?
Oh, I think that's been the best part in a lot of ways. Those are a couple different questions. The hardest part is rebuilding the social structure. There's different places to get it. And I have a small handful of really good friends. But I grew up with a lot of siblings. And so, again, it's one of the things I like about New York, is that it somehow gives me a sense of that. But no, I want to have a bigger group of really cool people. I want to be around other creators that are like part of culture and change. And so that's been the hardest part, but it's a challenge that I embrace, because I feel like what it's gonna, for me to get the kind of friends that I want, what it really is just me doing is doing what I am afraid to do. Like putting myself out there, putting stuff out there, because I feel like attracts like, you will start to attract other people that are up to it. And then there was a question about my belief.
How were you able to find your own ideas and be able to trust other people again?
I don't know if I ever started to distrust. Instead, what I feel like happened, and some people do things because they're being selfish and they're thinking about their own best interest, and they're being actually manipulative. There's also people that cause a lot of pain because they're completely unaware. And there's a good mix of that in cults. There's very few, in my experience, that are actually complete assholes. There doesn't need to be that many. There just needs to be a couple people that are really dark, and then tell the story, and then actually a group of well-meaning people can keep that pain moving forward. I think that's an important point, because it doesn't just make bad people to make bad results.
Yeah.
It can take well-meaning people that make bad results if you're following a bad system.
Yeah, systems, not people.
Yeah, like I love a lot of people from my church. I don't love the institution as far as what created it, but I do know, my own family included, of where I come from, like well-meaning people that are doing the best that they can, doing the best that they know how, given what they were given. And so my frustration is on the group institution ideas that holds them down. And it's sometimes hard to see where one ends and one begins. But I've always loved people. It's one of the reasons I'm living the life I am now. I love all sorts of people. I've traveled the world at this point: Costa Rica, Israel, Thailand, London, Paris, now in New York City. And that's the thing I love about New York City, is variety of humans. Like I can just walk out my apartment and bump into just a bunch of different people. I love that. And then it's just been like, I took the pressure off of myself as far as beliefs go. I took the pressure off of myself thinking that I needed to rush into some other belief system. I thought I needed to at first. I was like, oh, it's not fundamentalist Mormonism. Is it regular Mormonism? Is it some other fundamentalist church? I went through that whole thing, and that went away pretty fast. And then I was like, well, is it this? Is it that? And at this point, I feel like I've joined a new church. It's a church of one. There's no proselytizing. It's the Church of Calvin Wayman. And
nice. I was like, so interested. I'm not looking for converts.
Yeah. Yeah, and there's all these things that are still important. It's important to have purpose. It's important to have values and stuff like that. I just saw a comedian talk about this, and it felt so true. It's like organized religion is kind of like the off-the-shelf suits that aren't tailored for you. It's like, put it in. Yeah, it can like work, but it looks like boxy on you.
Yeah.
I want tight-fitted like belief systems that fit my body and my being and my soul, and like, is there a God? Is there not? I'm like, a lot of these things are still open for debate. All I do know that is if I believe something, it's not just because it sounds true. It's because I grappled with it for a while. I really considered it. I felt good whether it was true or not, and like came to something and like, okay, this is what I think it is. Like, it was mine.
Oh, I love that. The Church of Calvin. So with that in mind, what is your Linda Listen statement? You can be preaching to preaching to the choir or preaching to the converts that you don't have. No, I'm just kidding. What is a sassy statement that you have for our listeners, or something inspirational?
One life. One life. That's what I came to during the time of me deciding. When I was trying to decide, am I going to listen to my own internal guiding system and external one? The thing I realized was the storytellers that humans are, we've been talking since we've been around, where we came from. We've been talking about what are we doing here. We've been talking about where we're going. We've created stories in different cultures all around the world for generations, why we're here and what we're doing and all that sort of stuff. But there's one thing that I know more than any of those stories, even though a lot of them sound good. And that is, I am right here on this sofa talking to you on this interview in this life. The thing I know is I'm in this one. I don't want the rest of what I hope was before this or what I hope is after fuck this one up.
Yeah.
And so the thing is just recognizing and living like, this is the one I know more than anything that I have. One life. What are you going to do with it? Yes. It's yours to do what you want. So that's it for me.
I love it.
One life.
Linda, listen, you got one life. Live it. Amazing. Do you have any final thoughts before we wrap up?
This was fun.
Yeah.
That's all I got. Like, this was
it was fun.
A fun conversation. Good to interact with your audience and stuff.
Yeah.
Cool to see what you guys are doing. So yeah, I had a really good time.
Awesome.
I'll have to bring you guys on mine.
Totally
when
up
I
for
have
it.
my podcast. Yeah. If you're ever in New York, I'll show you some rooftops, coffee shops. I'm gonna know all the spots by the time you get here. So if you need any tips,
all the apostate coffee shops, I'm there for it. Well, at least I'll get a tea. I still don't like coffee. Everyone seems to hold it against me, but I'm just not on board with coffee yet. But yes, we will do that. What is the website that you want people to go to for when your podcast is ready to drop so they can be notified?
culturedpod.com. They can put in their information and they'll get notified as soon as episodes drop. I have been saying that I'm hoping by fall, but maybe even sooner. Because it's becoming more and more that I'm like, okay, this is the thing that I really want to put thought and time and story into. And so, yeah, I'm excited to launch. So if you want to hear more, I'll go deeper into my story. I'm going to be bringing people on, yes, that have grown up in cults and have transitioned. I also want to have conversations around where cult-like thinking shows up in other parts of culture. Because that's a lens that I can't get rid of, having grown up where I grew up. And so I see it in places where it's still good. There's some places where it's like on the spectrum. It's like, if they go a little bit more, like that could really go culty. So I'll have some of those fun conversations and just trying things. Like I'll bring people from the arts, other parts of society that maybe don't get airtime, because the whole concept of cultured is like growing from a cult, but also trying new things, being exposed to new ideas, becoming well-rounded. So I'm really excited for it.
I love it. It's going to be great. You're going to be great. Everyone's going to love it. So thank you so much again. And to our listeners, if you would like to support the podcast, as you can see, we are in a new studio. We are leveling up, and it is because your support. And if it's not financially, it's if you can share the video with friends. All the views help us basically just level up. So I appreciate you. Or you could join my Patreon at patreon.com/cults to consciousness, where we talk about behind the scenes cult stuff and C2C stuff. If you like this episode, you will definitely like the one that we recorded previously with Calvin. I will link it here. We go more into his childhood and what fundamentalism is, fundamentalism in Mormonism. And of course, if you like this story, his story, you're going to want to hear Jude's story as well. I will link that at the end screen. And until next time, follow your highest excitement, be conscious and be well. Thanks for listening. If you like what you hear, it would mean a lot if you could like and subscribe on YouTube and leave a review or a comment to help with our visibility. You can also find me on social media at cults2consciousness or reach out by email at cults2consciousness@gmail.com.